Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Real Life Blue Stories podcast with your host, Megan Hall. And we're now up to episode 7. And I want to just say that a lot has happened here in the first couple of weeks that, I've put together this podcast, including now I've got a permanent co host in Kev. And if you know Kev from the Intercept podcast, Horseshoe Pride podcast, you know that we've been going back like for a couple of months now. And we just seem to gel really well. And so I pitched the idea out to Kev. I'm like, hey, would you want to be co-host? And he's like, absolutely, let's do it. So Kev, thank you for joining me. Thank you for hopping on.
Thank you, Meg. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm so glad that we get to work together again. It's a lot of fun. And I just realized this is odd. The first episode I ever did with you in Indie Intercept was episode 7. So we're on to something here. We did pretty
Okay.
well. We did pretty well with that show. It was an award-winning show, some would say. So I have a lot of faith. We're off and running. I couldn't be happier to be here.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that either, but once you said it out loud, I was like, oh, that is true. Okay. So maybe, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. All
Yes.
right. So we've been seeing a whole lot for the last couple of days. You and I have been throwing back and forth some ideas about things we wanted to talk about. But there's a lot happening on the timeline, out in Facebook, out in Twitter, just out in the NFL in general. So we're going to talk about it. So run a show tonight. We're going to talk about Lamar Jackson because obviously. We'll talk about, does Shane Steichen need a mobile quarterback for his system? Also, we'll talk about 2023 NFL draft. If the pick is Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, who do you pick? And then finally, there's some really interesting roster decisions that happened over the last couple of days. Chris Ballard comes out and says, hey, we're keeping both Ryan Kelly and Kenny Moore, which was a very interesting decision. So we'll get through that. But yeah, let's just hop right into it. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson. So the question has been whether or not the Colts should trade for Lamar. There's been a whole lot of, oh, this is an absolute, hey, this is a no-brainer. We need to make this happen. There's also been folks who have been on the other side. They're like, no, I don't really know. He's missed a whole lot of games, critical games. He's also really expensive. So now it's like, what do you do? So Kev, I want to get your thoughts on what have you been hearing and seeing, and what have you put together in your mind?
Well, Maggie, you probably know some of what I've been hearing because we hear a lot of the same things on Twitter, at least. So there has been a big wave of folks that I know, some of whom I trust and know quite well, that are all in. Someone might say they have been pushing the agenda for Lamar Jackson for a long time, even before he was known to be available. We've known folks that have been clamoring for this, if you will. So I have seen a lot of the let's trade for Lamar folks. Now, however, there have been some of those sprinkled in. And it's interesting. Hi, Sarah. She took the words right out of my mouth. I am so torn on this one. You could really convince me one way or the other. So what I will say is I'm worried about the price, Meg. I think for all the reasons that you said, there's a little bit of issues with longevity and with the ability to make it through an entire season. And some of that maybe is directly correlated to how much running and how much extra Lamar brings to the table. But the best ability is availability. And so while I would love to have that playmaker on the field, I don't know if it's worth giving up multiple. Are we in a trade situation still? We're gonna have to give up multiple assets here as well. So what are we
Yeah.
talking at that point? What's that price? 2 firsts? I don't know what a realistic price is for Lamar right now. And so without even considering does he do enough to make this a playoff team? Because then there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other conversation, in my opinion. Like, do we have enough to win in Lamar's window, right? Because you don't want to go in for all this and then have him be in the same situation he was just in Baltimore. What's that going to do for him? So, for all of those reasons, I'm leaning out. Meg, what's your gut telling you?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked. My gut says no as well, but I say no for a couple of reasons. So, and I've said this, over the last couple of days, I've had my mentions just absolutely ruined on Twitter for, speaking about this. But hey, such is life, right? But I'm out for a couple of reasons. So, let's start with the money. The money is really important because the Colts have already spent $104 million on quarterbacks, Band-Aid quarterbacks at that, since 2019, right? So they've already thrown out money, right? Now you're talking about spending that same amount plus potentially more for Lamar, right? Obviously, we know he's not going to get, or he doesn't necessarily want the guarantees that Deshaun Watson has, but he's going to want something similar, I would think, to the Russell Wilson or the Kyler Murray contracts of the world, like something in that realm. So that's a lot of money to put out there. Plus, the Colts have already given up 3 high-end draft picks trying to acquire quarterbacks. You're going to add 2 more high-end draft picks, first rounders at that. That's a lot for them to bite off, right? To get this talent. And so the argument has been, well, it's Lamar Jackson, he's worth it. I get it. I do. I do think he's worth it. But the issue is not whether or not I think he's worth it. The issue is whether or not the Colts have been afforded this decision to be able to do it, right? Like they have been just throwing anything at the wall, it seems like, to hopefully find something that sticks. And every time they try, it's not worked out well for them, regardless of whatever that decision is. If it's a veteran quarterback, and yes, that veteran quarterback is Lamar Jackson, you have to get away from that, right? That's the first thing. The other thing is, are we really paying attention to Chris Ballard and who he is? Like this is not his MO at this point, because again, the luxury to do this went away like 3 quarterbacks ago, right? Like you can't just be like, hey, I'm going to go out and get Lamar because that's the right decision, because it makes sense. Oh, it's going to elevate our roster. I don't see that being Chris Ballard. The other thing is that he hasn't had the opportunity to draft a quarterback with the intent for this quarterback to start and build around said quarterback. And I think that decision is really intriguing to him. I also think that he's now at the point where he has to get this right. Like, so whether the choice is Lamar or whether the choice is the draft, you got to get it right. He spoke about that endlessly. I mean, endlessly at his end of season press conference, talking about how he failed. I got to make, right decisions. You saw that with their coaching decision. They took almost 6 weeks to pull a guy and multiple interviews, and you think that they aren't like, straining over this Lamar decision? Yeah, they kind of are, but on the same token, they're like, okay, no, the future is, hey, we need to build, right? So that's why I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me in my mind that the Colts would go out, spend all this money for Lamar and the picks, and be happy with that decision, because it's a really big gamble, no matter how surefire, Colts Twitter has liked to tell me that it is, because it's Lamar Jackson, it's a former MVP. I would add one final thing. Jim Irsay kind of tipped his hand a little bit over the last several days. He said, I'm not a fan of guaranteed contracts. He basically said, like, hey, I don't really think that they're great, right? They're that great. He said he wouldn't rule out Lamar, but he said that the cap implications plus the draft capital makes it a really tough decision. That right there should tell you where this team is leaning towards.
Agreed. And I've said this before, but not on this program. The winning formula that I've seen work the most is rookie quarterback contract with big money spent on the team around. So you have to get the right guy. Doesn't matter if you swing and miss there, but yeah, we need to go out and find this name is a bad name to use in present day, but we need to go find our Russell Wilson and build a legion of boom and go win games that way. That's my preferred path for the future. I doubt that. Some of it, I think, is an indictment on the Colts as well. I just, like you said, does Lamar elevate this roster? Certainly. But is it a playoff and a championship caliber team if you just take what is here and just add Lamar? Because what else are you going to be able to add after that with all the assets you're getting rid of, with all the money that it's going to cost? You would basically have to say, okay, this is what we've got, and it's good enough to go take us where we want to be. And I don't think it's worth the cost. I think we're better to stay the course, and maybe it'll take another year or two to get where we need to go. But I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting comment that we've got. So it says that's why the Falcons punted on Lamar and are rolling with Desmond Ridder. I think you're going to see a lot of teams that are saying, "Hey, we're out on Lamar. We're just going to roll with who we have." I think the larger thing becomes like, what is the right choice, right? Like, and you brought it up earlier about like, hey, we got to have a Russell Wilson and build around him. I would argue, like, you do it the way that the Bengals did it. They went out and drafted Joe Burrow, then they went and got into, wide receivers. They get Jamar Chase, they get T. Higgins, they get all these other, skill players to help build around their quarterback. They built it. So the Colts aren't exactly in a position again to be like, you know what, that veteran quarterback looks nice and shiny. Let me go grab that guy again because they've done it. They've done it 3 times in a row now. So and I cannot see a world in which Chris Ballard is like, yep, let me try this one more time. Let me throw more money into this. Let me throw more picks at this and expect him to feel comfortable in his current role, which even though he's safe, I'm gonna put that in soft quotes. Um, Jim Irsay is growing increasingly impatient with seeing his team not be playing at optimal levels. So I can't see a world in which that Chris Ballard goes down that train again. That's my
Agreed.
thoughts.
Agreed. That patience hits zero if you cash in for a veteran quarterback and that doesn't work. You any leniency the GM has right now is going to be only aided by having a rookie quarterback under center because of course no one's going to expect that guy to come out and win games week 1. But if you go out and get Lamar, you better be winning week 1 and so on. So yeah, that hot seat gets even hotter if you make this move.
Well, and that's my other thing too. I'm like, okay, so if you go out and get Lamar, like people are assuming that this instantly makes the Colts like, so much better. They're gonna rattle off all these wins, instant playoff contender. I'm like, yeah, you thought the same thing about Matt Ryan. And no, Matt Ryan's not Lamar, but you ran into this same sort of excitement, this enthusiasm. Oh, we could go get out, go get a top guy on the market. I'm not so sure. I'm not convinced. I'm really not convinced that that Lamar is going to solve all that because the other issue is there's so many other roster implications here and holes here that need to be filled and addressed that just throwing Lamar Jackson into the mix does not suddenly fix all of that. Doesn't absolve the team of that. So, all right. That was a good session I think on Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about this. So, in I would say in this conversation about Lamar Jackson and hey, do we go trade for him or do we draft a quarterback? There's been some other conversations about does Shane Steichen need a mobile quarterback in his system? And I thought this was a very interesting question. I can't remember exactly who posed it the other day, but I saw it as I was roaming Twitter, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like, do you think this is something that has to happen in order for Shane Steichen to be successful? His quarterback has to be mobile.
Well, I don't believe that's the case, and I believe I know how you feel about this, Meg. So I'm going to leave some of this here for you as well because I think we're in agreement on this one. I don't think we're going to be debating undisputed style on this one. I think that one of the reasons that the Colts got Steichen is their faith in what he can build around a quarterback, and from what is it, Rivers to Herbert to Hurts, so he's had levels of success with all three of those guys. I, it certainly seems like he likes playing with and drawing up plays for a mobile quarterback. But no, I don't think it's a necessity. I think some of that is just a symptom of the modern game. Like it's just so much more exciting. I think all of us fans, we all prefer a dual threat quarterback. If you're playing in Madden, that's who you're going to start your dynasty with. So I don't know how much of that is real. I don't know that Steichen actually needs a mobile quarterback. But what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really I don't really subscribe to the notion that he needs a mobile quarterback. Would it be beneficial? Yeah, absolutely. I think that Chris Ballard has talked about um, the evolution of the quarterback and how it's helpful to have a quarterback who can be mobile. But I don't think that they really went into picking Shane Steichen to be the head quarterback or head coach with the intent that their quarterback was going to automatically be mobile, right? I think it was more so what does Shane Steichen bring to the table? How can he help us no matter who the quarterback pick is, right? Because he's got experience there. He's worked with, Philip Rivers. He's worked with Justin Herbert's rookie season. He's now worked with Jalen Hurts. And that's three different types of quarterbacks. It's not like they're all the same. And he's had success at those various levels. So it makes me think, okay, this is less about the need for a mobile quarterback and more about what can Shane Steichen and that fact Cam Turner, the quarterback coach, what can they do for whoever is going to be the quarterback? That's really the way I think of it.
Right, I agree. This isn't Cliff Kingsbury who's brought in specifically to coach a quarterback. I think this was a guy who's brought in because he is thought to be a great quarterbacks coach, and then beyond. I don't think it's solely about the quarterback here, but yeah, I agree with your take on that. I think the reason they went and got their guy is because they know how murky these early round quarterback waters are, and they also know how important it is that we're going to have to go get a guy here soon. So let's make sure that we have someone who's well equipped to maximize the potential of whoever it is that we end up building this offense around.
Yeah, yeah, would agree, and I think that's where the Colts are right now. They're all about how can we maximize what we currently have. We've seen this roster not be that, quite frankly, and so now it begs the question like, okay, what do we do now? And so speaking of that, I want to ask this, and I want to make sure that I get this because this has been a hot topic on Twitter. So obviously with the Colts at 4, the conversation has been, hey, Bryce Young's likely not going to be there. CJ Stroud's likely not going to be there. Is the pick then Will Levis or is the pick Anthony Richardson? And I probably feel a little passionate about this topic now because my mentions have been in ruins for like days now about, whether or not the pick should be this or that. And shout out to Logan Schmidt from the Blue Stable. I was in his space on Friday and we were talking about the same topic, and you got some pretty passionate fans in there. And I want to bring this up because I thought it was very interesting. There was a fan in there who was, wholeheartedly like Will Levis was his guy. Like that's his guy.
I think I heard
And
this one.
yeah, and there were several other folks in the space who also were in on Levis. I won't deny that. But there were some folks who were like, "Hey, I think it could be Anthony Richardson." And so it was very interesting watching him, speak back and forth about like, no, it should be Will Levis. It's going to be Will Levis, and people being like, "Well, actually, I prefer Anthony Richardson because of XYZ reasons." So it made me think. I'm like, "Oh, this should be a good like topic for the podcast," and I want to get your thoughts on it. Maybe if you've dove into film today or anything else like that, which I assume you have if I
Mm-hmm.
know you well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
who do you pick in the situation? If you're sitting there at 4, is it Will Levis or is it Anthony Richardson?
This one is so tough. And I've got a lot to say here. I wrote a lot down when I looked into this, and here's the cliff notes of it before I get into things more granularly. I think that Richardson has the lower floor but the higher ceiling, and I think that when we talked about maximizing potential, I think that the most the highest possibility of maximized potential comes from Richardson. Now, I want to get in a little bit into the numbers though, because there is a lot to get in, and there's a lot more just in the tape that you can see that goes beyond the numbers. Because for every overthrow one quarterback might have had, a receiver drops one that hits him in the numbers, and those all count the same unless you're looking at the adjusted statistics and all of that stuff. So, luckily, I looked into some of that. So we probably know this one, right? Anthony Richardson, 54% completion percentage. Adjusted under pressure, it's somehow better at 55%, but it's virtually the same. Meanwhile, Levis takes a big step up under pressure. He only completed 64% of his passes last season, but he completed 72% of them when he was under pressure. I also liked just what I saw when Levis was throwing on the run. Now, some of this tape is selected, right? When you're watching through someone's highlight reel, or I'm trying to watch from multiple sources, but I will say I've seen plenty of Will Levis footage where that footwork is not good at all, especially if he's running, up across his body, kind of short steps it and just really relies on that cannon that he has. They both have incredibly strong arms there. You can check that box for both of them. But I would say what stood out for me about Richardson was the number of just really bad misses, like the number of
Mm-hmm.
blatant overthrows, the throws that you just can't miss, and you're not going to get away with those in the NFL. Will Levis, I saw hit a few tighter windows, so I think right now Will Levis is more prepared for the NFL today. He also had played in 40 games, I think, compared to Richardson's 13 in college, so much more
Mm-hmm.
seasoned. The caveat with him is the injuries, because it looks like he fell off a cliff as far as his running ability from 21 to 22. However, he sustained 2 injuries throughout the season. And Mel Kiper, take this for what it's worth, said that when it comes to his running ability, you should just throw last year out the window and look at 2021. I don't think you can do that. I mean, he was out there, he was playing, so you have to break that tape down. But if it's true that he was that banged up and he wasn't playing with a great supporting cast, then maybe there's a more athletic upside to Levis than we can currently see. But despite all that, I still think it's Richardson. If you know you're taking a gamble with either of these guys, so give me the gamble where I stand to win more.
Yeah, that's a fair take. I think for me, and I liked this. I like these comparisons and these thoughts that I saw from a couple other analysts. But basically, they've got Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud in a tier one, and it's really 1A, 1B, depending on what you like. C.J. Stroud seems to have elevated himself over the last couple of weeks, due to like, hey, he's got the size concerns are
Mhm.
still real for Bryce Young, and I get it, but they're really right there. It's really a matter of whatever you like. But it becomes very, very heated when you get down to tier two and you get Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. And I think that a couple things happen when you look at the tape. So for Anthony Richardson, yes, you very much see the raw ability. You see that, okay, this guy's going to need some time. 13 games is not a whole lot of a pedigree, if you will, or a resume for you to really truly assess what this guy can do. The other thing that makes this interesting to me, though, is that Will Levis does have several games of footage and still comes in right around the same sort of questions, which makes it very interesting to me, right? Like they both have accuracy concerns. I mean, Levis has a flat out cannon. We knew that, right? But so does Anthony Richardson. I think the issue is that, like, okay, so for Levis to have all that cannon, he can't hit, a 6 yard out route, right? Like he can't hit this nice little pass there. You'll see him quickly either throw it behind the wide receiver or just completely miss him. Same thing with Anthony Richardson. It's very interesting. But ask him to throw 60 yards down the field, boom, the ball's there. It's like, okay, all right. So you both can do that. The other thing that I bring up, whenever I watch them is, yeah, the footwork with both of them is inconsistent. Uh, Will Levis is a bit more consistent, but still inconsistent. And Anthony Richardson, I'm really like, I have no idea what his footwork is going to look like from play to play, which really makes it hard for you to watch him. It was very evident as well at the combine. If you watch the combine, much of the same, like kind of just reinforce whatever you saw on tape. So it's a tough situation if you're going to be in there. I think the other thing to think about is, to your point earlier, you brought up about throwing out the 2022 tape. You can't, okay? Like, I get it. It is not fair. The guy's gone through a number of offensive coordinators. He's gone through injuries. He's gone through not having a supportive cast. But all of that is taken into consideration when you're at the NFL level. Like, that is what happened. Like, you don't get to say, well, yeah, I was missing a wide receiver, or yeah, I my thumb was not doing great this week. Like, you see plenty of quarterbacks go out and play through those injuries. I'm not saying it makes it right one way or the other, but that is what you were judged on. So if you're going to bring this evaluation, it's got to be the total package. And I think for Will Levis, you see the 2021 season, you see the possibilities. But then you see the 2022 season, you're like, oh, okay, there's the floor, right? And I thought it was very interesting. I think it was I was having a conversation with Andrew Moore and Zach as well, Zach Hicks, and they both had these really interesting comps for Will Levis, and it was like, hey, Andrew said at the ceiling, it's Matthew Stafford, right? Really big physical guy, can make all the throws, and at the floor, it's Carson Wentz, and it's the questionable decision making and the things that make you want to throw out, pull out your hair. But Zach gave a Ryan Tannehill like comp for Will Levis, and I said, oh.
Oh,
I hadn't thought about that. And I said to myself, I was like, oh, that's good. Because
I
I've
don't
been
mind that.
struggling. I've really been struggling to find like what is Will Levis's soft spot, middle of the pack. Like, what is it? I saw the Carson Wentz, like that was evident. I was like, oh,
Yep.
okay, yep, that screams. And then when I see the Matthew Stafford, I'm like, yeah, that tracks as well. I was thinking along those lines. But Ryan Tannehill makes a very, very interesting comp. So I just want to throw that out there for the folks who are listening and watching. Like, just keep that in your back pocket. I think if I go on the other side of the fence with Anthony Richardson, I think at the floor, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how low his floor could go. I think I see the high upside, and I see like a Cam Newton, a Lamar Jackson. I see those things. I mean, the guy practically calls himself Cam Jackson at the at the combine. So I see those things with him. I worry about Anthony Richardson's success, though. Like, that's the issue. Like, he has to be in the right situation. He has to be with enough around him, and you've got to tailor an offense that's going to let him grow, because he's still got a ton of growth to do. I think with Will Levis, the growth is still evident, but I don't think there's not as much there. So I think if you're going to pick either quarterback there, just be prepared that you're going to have those growing pains regardless. And I think that's why they're both still in the same tier, even though I do think Levis is the better quarterback. He's at the top end of that bottom tier, if that makes sense. Like they're in the same tier, but on kind of opposite ends. So I will be curious to see what the Colts will do there. But I will throw this out there because I was reading this just maybe it was a day or two ago. Chris Ballard made some very interesting comments at the NFL, the league meetings, and he said everyone's down on the, hey, we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to evaluate there. But there's plenty of other guys in this draft who we could evaluate, and we're going to go out and find the guy that works for us. It's the right fit that will give us a chance to win. And I'm throwing it out there because I just know, you and I both know, Kev, it's going to happen. When the Colts don't take a quarterback at 4, like it's going to unravel because it's going to be like, what do you mean? We just passed over all this talent. Are you insane? But you just know, like if you've been watching Chris Ballard, you just know it's a possibility. It's got to be, right?
I'm still not convinced he won't trade down. And I don't think it might not be a significant trade down. But I could see Chris Ballard, especially with the way that he's talking, and he could be banking on some of these other teams overvaluing some of these guys and saying, hey, look, I can get the guy that Chris Ballard, want at 6 or at 7, and it's not a quarterback anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and make that trade with I'll pick on the Raiders just for fun. I'll go ahead and make that trade with the desperate Raiders. I could absolutely see that happening. And whether or not I agree with it is a different story. But 100%, yeah, see lose onto it. Can't wait for the Colts to not take a QB at 4. It's coming. I feel it. I feel it. Because Anthony Richardson at times gives me, and not in their play style, but just simply in the draft life cycle with this hype, it reminds me a little bit of Malik Willis of last year. And if it reminds me of that, I'm sure it reminds a couple other GMs of that as well, where they're thinking, am I really going to be the guy that goes that takes this swing in the first round? I don't know. I don't know if Chris Ballard is going to be that guy to take that swing. So he maybe has some different values. Is there someone that you think he likes in the late rounds? Oh, because so that's the name. Yes, Mike. Yes.
Interesting you mentioned that. So Mike said from Torn the AFC South said it wouldn't surprise me if the Colts took Hendon Hooker late in the draft. So let me say this: the Colts do have a top 30 visit with Hendon Hooker, like they do with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. So they're at least intrigued by these prospects. The other name I've seen lately was this one that Sarah brought up, which was Jaron Hall. So there's a couple again. To the point, like I need y'all to pay attention here. There's some deeper things going on here. And I will say this. Chris Ballard is not going to be forced to take a quarterback at 4. He is not going to force a fit. He's going to say, okay, great. If there's nobody there that we're overly thrilled about, which they've said, this draft is not one where they see like a whole ton of big separation, or they don't see a Joe Burrow or a Trevor Lawrence, that they would not be forced to be like, you know what? We're going to trade back. Or, you know what? Hey, let's pick our corner here and let's come back and get Hendon Hooker like back half of the first round. Or, hey, if he happens to slide all the way to us at 35, like let's take him and run with him. I would not be shocked at those. So Hendon Hooker is definitely on my radar. Jaron Hall, over the last couple of days, I've seen a little bit more about him. I just think that fans need to be prepared that the pick might not be a quarterback at 4. And I really want you to, like, I keep mentioning it because I really want you to think about this, that it might not be there. All this talk about it. And as much as Chris Ballard is going to do his homework on quarterbacks, like you and I both know that, like, yeah, you could be super hyped about all these quarterbacks at the top of the top of the draft, but there could be value later on in the rounds. You just got to know the guy, to go out and pick. And I think I trust the Colts scouting department here as well. They've also found some hidden gems in the later rounds, not necessarily in the quarterback room per se, but in other players. So I'm just throwing it out there. I just didn't want anybody to get their feelings hurt when it happens at 4, and because you just know, like Colts Twitter and Facebook and Colts fans everywhere are probably going to unravel.
I can't wait to see the GIFs in James Boyd's tweet that day when that happens.
Yeah, shout out to James Boyd of the Athletic. Yeah, I know his GIF thread is going to be legendary. Ooh. Legendary. All right, so now that we talked about that, I want to talk about some other decisions that the Colts have made. There's one recently that they made, and it was to keep Ryan Kelly and Kenny Moore. And I thought that that was very interesting that this comes out at the league meetings, like, hey, we're going to keep the guys. We did get some trade offers for them, but not anything that we felt was of value or substantial. Let me say that. Oh my gosh, I just saw this. Chris said, I can't wait till Tanner McKee is a Colt. All right, Chris. Yeah, I think Chris just lives for chaos. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I
Mhm.
think this is where the Lamar Jackson stuff started up like early in the season. He was like, him and Justin were like, yeah, push the agenda. They just live for whatever chaos that they can put together. So yeah, having Tanner McKee end up as a Colt might also unravel this fan base. I just want to throw that out
I'm
there.
just looking forward to that Drop Balls Pod jersey swap, that jersey edit for Tanner McKee as a Colt. I'll be looking
Yeah,
for that on my timeline.
we need that. We need that, Chris. Get to work. We need that. The other things to think about is, yeah, what does this mean for the Colts in keeping Ryan Kelly and Kenny Moore? Like, what did it say to you, the fact that they kept them?
What it tells me, honestly, it tells me that maybe this team or the front office thinks they're a little bit closer to having a winning team than maybe all of the fan base might think. I don't know. I think a lot of us expected both of these guys to be traded to make some salary cap space, and so I don't know. I'm interested. I like both of these players. I feel bad for Ryan Kelly. I hope he has a bit of a turnaround this season. I will say this. I'm just objectively happy about Kenny Moore still being here. I enjoy having him in the defensive backfield, but I thought a change of scenery might do well for Ryan Kelly, and also just shuffling any of the decks on the Titanic that is the Colts offensive line feels good to me. Sorry, I said chairs. I meant chairs. I said decks, but yeah, I like Kenny Moore staying. I would have preferred us to maybe move on from Ryan Kelly, but that's what I'm reading into this, Meg, is that either those offers were really bad, or what I am leaning towards, maybe they think we might be good next year. So let's keep the depth there. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. So for Ryan Kelly, I definitely pegged him as someone who would be like a cap casualty, right? He had like a $12 million cap hit. Cutting him, would have saved substantial money. And I think also Kelly has not looked the same since he got his extension in 2020, right? Like the play has been just progression of slides. And I would say that for him, that's not exactly great for, at the time when they gave him this money, he was the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL, or at least highest paid center, excuse me. Now he's still top five in terms of money being paid, and you're not getting, top five kind of play, right? So it makes it very interesting. So I'm curious to see what offers that they get for Ryan Kelly, and how they came back with the conclusion like, no, we're going to stay pat. But what I will say is this, and shameless plug, I'm hoping that my article I'm writing on this will come out soon here in the next couple days. I'll say is this: that offensive line went through complete turmoil the entire season. And so keeping Kelly allows you to keep some stability there. And I think maybe that could have been a driving factor for why they were like, hey, not going to get rid of him. Because you got to think, like Chris Ballard said it as well, was that he made some assumptions that the play from Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, and Quentin Nelson would be a lot better, and that the rest of the line would basically fall in line. So that tells you how much he trusts Ryan Kelly, how much faith he puts in Ryan Kelly, and quite frankly, he's probably one of the few good holdovers from the Ryan Grigson era that you could be proud of. That's on your roster, right? Like it's it's one of those where you're like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, we'll keep this guy. So I would say that's probably likely where the mindset is. Kenny Moore, I thought, was a very interesting keep because, he gets this nickname lightning in a bottle from Frank Reich. He has this Pro Bowl season, and then he comes through, and it's not great. He comes through right before camp. I want my money. You're going to pay me like the corner that I am. Okay, great, Kenny. We hear you. Still not going to happen. His play does not back it up. He's dealing with injuries and everything else, and and I quote, not a great fit in Gus Bradley's system. It's just not, it's not exactly ideal. But I think what likely saved Kenny is that they traded away Stephon Gilmore because they wanted to give Gilmore a chance to go play for a contender, right? And if you get rid of Kenny Moore as well, you are extremely thin You're already thin now, but you're extremely thin without Kenny Moore. You're talking about Isaiah Rodgers, Tony Brown, and Dallas Flowers at cornerback.
Mhm.
And it's not exactly, not exactly real great. Oh my gosh.
I love
Mike
Flowers
said,
returning kicks, though.
Mike said Kenny Moore went from lightning in a bottle to dud in a can. Oh my goodness, Mike. I mean, but that is the reality of the season. Like, you just did not see the same sort of vibrancy and play from him. And there were a lot of times I would look over and see Kenny just absolutely lost in coverage. And I think that is not exactly what you want to see. So I think this is hey, we're going to give you some grace here because we are also in a bind. And yeah, it's probably very likely similar situation. They came over and were like, yeah, we don't really like these offers that we're getting for you. We're just gonna stay pat here. But don't be shocked. Do not be shocked if the play of either one of these players continues to slide throughout the season, that the Colts don't come and revisit those trade conversations, because I think Jim Irsay is looking for a way to continue to have his team be optimal at all times. And we've now reached that like continual sort of churn where we are tilling this roster and making sure that it's going to be able to compete with the likes of the AFC South and the rest of the league in general.
Yeah, and I will say one last thing. I think that I feel like the Colts may have misplayed their hand with this, because we saw on Twitter that the Colts were interested in looking into trade offers for Kelly, and that they might consider cutting him. And some of this stuff, maybe obviously there are a handful of Twitter accounts you just can't trust if you see them. I'm not even going to name them because I don't even want to give them that much plug, but it's possible that this could have been an unsubstantiated rumor. But it's just, if you're thinking about making a salary cap move, you probably shouldn't announce it, right? Because you're not going to get a good offer in return. If everybody knows, well, you're probably going to cut this guy if I don't trade for him, you're not going to get an offer. So that was maybe my thought, is if they do revisit it, maybe just don't say anything about it this time. Maybe just talk to a couple of close buddies in your GM circle this next time.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot come out over the last, or I would say we have seen a lot come out over the last couple of weeks, and you will continue to see this. I thought it was very interesting. Shad McGinnis tweeted out, I think, again, earlier today, he was like, we are officially in lying season. So, don't believe everything that you see. So that's something, just, hey, keep that with a grain of salt about all these rumors that you might see or things that come out. Like, in my opinion, unless it comes from a reliable source in terms of like, hey, this person professionally covers the Colts, or hey, they professionally cover the NFL for, the likes of ESPN, Fox Sports, NBC, things of that nature. That's where you trust those sources. But anything else, it's like, you need to verify before you just assume like, hey, this is correct. But I would also say this: if you know your team, you know what's feasible and what's not. You knew that Ryan Kelly and Kenny Moore could be potentially on the block before we even got to this portion. If you knew, how they played over the last season. And at the end of the day, like, the team is looking to continue to get younger, right? Like, that's just the reality of where we are. You've got to continue to get younger. The rest of the league is doing that. The rest of the league is like, yep, we're going, young all over. And the Colts, while they are on the younger side now, still have to continue to do that in order to compete. So just, hey, take that with a grain of salt here. Just saying. Just saying. All right. I think that was a lot. We covered quite a bit. Did I miss anything? Anything you want to ask that has been on your heart?
Ooh, I am going to give you a nice softball, because I
Okay.
would love to know what is up. What do you got next and if you're allowed, I don't even know if you're allowed to spoil upcoming articles, but what are you looking at for the Colts offseason? We've been talking about what's going on under center, but we haven't talked up until that last segment in depth about the rest of the team. So where else are you looking at as we head into the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about wide receivers. I've talked about needing to put some gusto, so to speak, behind that wide receiver group. I think that the Colts did, they did help themselves with Isaiah McKenzie, and shout out to Andrew Moore and Jake Walster. They had Isaiah McKenzie on their podcast, I think earlier this week, and released that episode very recently today. So yeah, really good stuff from them. If you haven't watched that podcast episode, it's great. It's got a lot of good nuggets about why Isaiah McKenzie chose the Colts in the AFC South. So I think the other things that I'm thinking about is what are the Colts going to do at corner? That's something that I've toyed with. I got asked a question the other day about like, hey, if the Colts don't go quarterback at 4, would they take a swing on a corner? And my answer is yeah, absolutely. I think that Chris Ballard could be intrigued by a Christian Gonzalez at 4 if he's there. Of course, he could be intrigued by trading back and still staying in the first round, but picking up a Joey Porter Jr., which would also work really well in Gus Bradley's system. Like there's some options there. I'm here for the draft chaos. I mean, I will say this as a fan, I'm not. As a fan, I'm like, you cannot be serious right now. But as an analyst, I'm like, yeah, give me the draft chaos because I think at this point the Colts have to do something different than what they've done. The way that Chris Ballard has operated for the past 6 seasons has gotten him some success, but not quite the success that he is touted that he's capable of. So I think you're going to see some different decisions there. So I'm sure we'll see more of that from me over the next couple of weeks, and it also depends on what else happens in free agency. I think we got this like really nice burst here in the legal tampering period where everyone's like, oh, he's making moves. What is happening? Like everyone's super excited. And then it just went really quiet. So it was a kind of like a, hey, yeah, I hear you guys. I'm over here working, but I'm only going to do so much. And so I think that we're now in the period of hurry up and wait, which is what I like to describe Chris Ballard as, is that fans get really, really excited and they're like super passionate about what's going to happen. And they're telling him to hurry up. And he's like, yeah, just chill here. I'm working. So, yeah, I don't want to spoil all my things that, will have come down the pipeline, but you'll see more of that here over the next couple of weeks. And then, yeah, once the draft gets here, yeah, we'll have plenty of analysis coming out of like, what do these draft picks mean? What does this mean for the franchise? What does this mean for Shane Steichen, the players? Like, yeah, you're going to see quite a bit of that from us.
Yeah, I'm excited. You hit it all. I know I learned one thing I've learned 2 things from my fantasy or my mock drafts, I should say. I've learned that if you try to do that Hayden Hooker thing, PFF will give you an F for your draft. If you try to take a different need at number 4 and go Hooker in the second round, no, they are not having it. I also learned that the Colts need to draft a wide receiver because I did a mock draft where I just loaded us in the trenches and on the defensive backfield, and it was like, oh yeah, probably need someone to go out and catch passes. So anyway, Jelani redemption arc, look out for it. That's going to be the year of the tight end in Indianapolis.
I'm here for that. I'm completely here for that. I've been ranting, I don't know, probably for weeks, months now at this point. Like, please get this man some touches. Some consistent play calling would do him a world of good.
Yeah, I think the new coach will recognize moments in the game flow where you can go ahead and put him in the formation. So I know the last guy had some issues with that at times, and that's okay. That's okay. But we're gonna have a big tight end, top 5 tight end next year. Look out.
Oh, okay. All right. Top 5 tight end. I'm gonna hold you to that. If Jelani doesn't get to top 5, we'll have to come back and look at this again. All right. So that was the show. I think that was really good. Just of us just to kind of kick back and forth. It's been a while since you and I have just sat down and talked, so I appreciate it. I did notice that Mike was in the comments and he said he was a little salty about not getting an invite to talk and be a co-host. Like, Mike and I talk all the time, so he knows where my heart is. He knows that I've got some good allegiance to him. He's a really good guy, and if you haven't checked out his podcast, Touring the AFC South, please go check it out. He's got some phenomenal talents on there coming on to talk about football, their lives, what they do, how it impacts their work. So please go check that out. That's Retweet. It for me. Yeah, that's it for me. Kev, where can the people find you? Tell them where they can find you on all the socials.
You can find me on Twitter. It's right there on screen at @KevNevick_. Other than that, you can find me at Bite Size Sports. I'll either be talking football or mainly I talk at the NBA and college basketball every Thursday night at 9. So that is Bite Size Sports anywhere the internet is made.
I like it. I like it a lot. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. It's at the Megan Hall. Also on, of course, on YouTube. Hit subscribe, the like button so you get the notifications when we go live for all of our wonderful content. I'm also on the Tick of Talk, as the kids like to say. It's real life blue stories. I know you like that, huh? But yeah, you'll catch little snippets there of our podcast, just as us looking back on the highlights, so to speak. And of course, finally, for any more Colts content from me, it's coltswire.usatoday.com. You'll find content from me and our wonderful staff there. And we're just going to keep it rolling. You can expect a whole lot between now and the start of the season. So please check it out.
And
But of
Horseshoe
course,
Pride, we can't forget Horseshoe Pride. So
oh
sorry, Meg,
yes,
we
yes.
can't do it.
I'm sorry. That is
All
a really good one.
right.
Kev and I are also on another podcast called the Horseshoe Pride Podcast, and that is all your lovely folks from the Indie Intercepts. If you knew us back from those days, it is us, Chris, Boom, Justin, Chip. Yeah, we like to keep it. We like to keep it pretty fun on there, and I'm sure we're gonna have a whole lot to talk about on Friday. Because if you haven't seen Chris's like Abby draw ups over the last couple of weeks of any and every possible player in a Colts jersey, like you were missing out some good content, my friend. So check that out. We will be live on Friday evening, right around 9 p.m. too, I think, as well. But as always, you've been listening to the Real Life Blue Stories podcast, where the stories may not always be blue, but they will be true. See ya.